Hello everyone and welcome to the best game of the first day of the US Championship. Well, what I think is the best game. I've seen all of the decisive ones and this is the one I enjoyed most, so it's the one I decided to show. And it's a game from round 1, two of the America's finest young gentlemen, Jeffery, Xiong and the Awonder Liang. Xiong, I think, is about 19 years old, whereas Liang is 17, so very, very young but extremely strong grandmasters. And well, there's a lot on the line. Will some of them surprise and win this event, or will Hikaru Nakamura, win it for the 6th or 7th time? I believe I believe he has 6 titles, and this could be his 7th, but we'll see what happens. However, it's not a classical event; it's a rapid event. 25 minutes for the entire game, plus a 5-second increment starting from move 1, as it says so on their website. And regarding a tie for first place will be determined by 2 10+2 rapid games, and if still tied, an Armageddon game will be played where white has 5 minutes to black's 4, but a draw counts as a win for black, of course. And there's $150,000 to be won altogether, with $40,000 being the prize for first place. So a lot to play for, and like I said, this is the one game I enjoyed most, so let's check it out. So Xiong with the white pieces opens with knight to f3, starts with a Reti opening. We have knight to f6 and now d4. Sorry about that. We have g6, going for some sort of an Indian setup, and knight b to d2. We have d5 and b4 now. Looks weird, but it has been played before many times. We have bishop to g7 as a white, so conveniently opened up this diagonal, and now e3, strengthening the center. We have castles by black and bishop to e2, so white also continues development, prepares the castle, and c6, strengthening the center. We have castles by white, and now a5, striking here, attacking the b4 pawn. This setup is very nice as it prevents black from immediately going c5, but black wants to undermine the b4 pawn, maybe get him to capture, open up his a file for the rook, and then at some point get this c5 move in. So white advances it to b5, and now says, okay, well, you can capture it, I'm defending it with the bishop, you're going to mess up your pawn structure, so instead we have c5. And with this, the battle for the center continues. And here there is one game in the database, Eva Moser versus Vladimir Baklan from 2008 in Bundesliga, where bishop to b2 was played, and black was able to win this game. Here we have c3, and it is as of move 9 that we have a completely new game. So let's see what happens here. Knight b to d7. Black continues development. Now we'll have some pressure in the center. Maybe e5 is an idea for the future. We have a4, strengthening the pawn here, and now b6. Black does the same, and also black will want to develop his light square bishop on this diagonal. That's a weird arrow, I know, but the new interface allows you to do that. So here, bishop to a3, white does the same, he wants his bishop on a nice diagonal, and now bishop to b7. We have c4, here white has to decide what to do, whether to first start with rook to c1, rook to e1, and then try and go for the breakthrough, or to go for the breakthrough right away, because this is one pawn you don't want to remain behind. So c4, putting more pressure on the center, and rook to c8. Black gets the rook to the one file that might open up soon, and white does the same. We have rook to c1, and now rook to e8. And here, white continues with c captures on d5. We have knight captures on d5, and now d captures on c5. And here, it's a very important capture, because regardless of how black recaptures first with the knight, and then whether to go with the pawn or with the rook, you will leave black with a very weak a5 pawn. So that's a problem for black. So knight captures on c5 was played. Of course, white happily captures with the bishop. We have b captures on c5, or you could capture with the rook, but the end result is the same. After pawn captures, the a5 pawn will still be weak. So here we have b captures on c5, and queen to b3 now. So now black has a weak a5 pawn, well, white has a passed b pawn, whereas black has a passed c pawn. So bit of a trade-off. However, white's b5 pawn is defended, whereas black's c5 pawn is not. And again, there's the problem of the a5 pawn, and it's not going to be easy to defend it. So knight back to b6, preparing to push the pawn, at some point also attacking the a4 pawn, and rook f to d1, now threatening some nasty discoveries as the queen is still on d8. We have queen to c7, and now knight to c4, putting pressure on this knight, preparing to bring the other knight into the game, and also putting immediate pressure on a5. So here, bishop to d5, pinning the knight, but white replies with knight f to d2. He says, okay, my knight is nicely defended, next I'm going to move the queen, and the threat remains. So here we have rook e to d8, and now comes queen to c2. So now white is ready to capture the pawn, while keeping an eye on the a4 pawn here. And here you could do a lot of things. You could start by capturing on c4, for example, knight captures, and another captures, for example, a nice rook trade with check. Sorry, first bishop captures. And then we could do a trade, or instead you could go for rook captures on d8 first, queen captures, and then bishop captures on c4. So this is one option for black, where white still gets his protected pass pawn, and black still has his pass pawn, but still keeps the weak a5 pawn. So this is one way for black to play this. However, Xiong decides to go for a different line. He decides not to eliminate the knight here twice, but rather he goes for e6. And now this is a bit of a problem for him, because although he's not going to lose any material, he will run into some problems, because here knight captures on a5 was of course played, and now rook to a8, attacking the knight, but also if the knight moves, then the a4 pawn is under attack. So here we have knight d to c4, defending the knight on a5, but just knight captures on c4 is possible. However, bishop captures on c4 was played. We have knight captures on c4, and now of course knight captures on a4. So it's the material is the same, nothing really changed here. However, it is a bit different. It seems like white has something more here than he did in the previous line. So here, bishop to f3, and this is an incredibly strong move. You grab hold of this diagonal, you no longer allow the rook to remain there, and the rook will have a lot of problems here, because the rook has to keep an eye on the knight here, and the only square available for you is after this trade with check, captures, is rook to a7. And now there's a problem here. How do you continue this game for white? It's still not a completely crushing move, but there is a really beautiful move that really puts a lot of pressure here on black's position. So feel free to pause the video and continue this game for white while I give you a couple of seconds. So for those of you who were able to do it, congratulations on spotting the incredibly powerful rook to d6. So also for those of you who just want to enjoy the show. Now the problem is the b6 square is now defended twice, and the b6 is a real problem for black. It's not easy to counter it. For example, if you try something like queen to b8, let's just try and make a move. You keep an eye on the d8 square. It's really bad actually, because after b6, yes, you can now move the rook, but now comes queen to d3, and now you're threatening to win the queen. Also, if the knight moves, that rook looks very, very awkward on a6. So one way black could continue is like bishop to f8. You still go for rook to d8, and now there's nowhere for the queen to go, because this is covered by the bishop, this is protected, the pawn doesn't allow access to the a7 and c7 squares, and of course every square on this dark square diagonal is taken. So here black seems to be losing the queen. However, there is this knight to b2 idea. We're just going to show it because it's really beautiful, and it seems like you can just grab the knight for free. However, this is even stronger. You just trade queens, captures, and now king to f1. You don't want to allow any back rank mating ideas, so here black is just completely lost. The pass pawn is too strong. Even if you try and stop it, let's say rook a4 b7 and rook to b4, just rook to d8, and now there's the problem. Still defended, threatening the queen, threatening to capture the knight. There's just no move here for black. So that's one way to play it. If you play with queen to b8, in the actual game, the move that was played is knight to c3. So you kind of have to prepare for something, and knight to c3 was played here, making room for this rook to deliver this check. However, the absolute strongest here was knight to b2, and we are going to show it just because it's super complicated, and so you would more easily understand why it's stronger than knight to c3. It's basically a tempo stronger, and that's what makes all the difference. So point being, after this knight to b2 idea, white still continues with b6, but now there's rook to a1 check, rook to d1 blocking. The problem with blocking with the bishop is that queen captures on d6 is just too strong. After you capture the queen, just knight captures on d1, and there's no defense here. Black threatens all sorts of mating discoveries, and there's simply no way to defend against that. If you try something like h3, okay, you will save against mate, but just a discovered check picks up the queen, and the rook is more than fast enough to stop the passed pawn. So one thing you could try is, let's say, b7, but still, just knight captures on e3 with check. You have to give up the queen, captures, and this is mate. So returning to our idea of knight to b2, with the idea of b6 and rook to a1 check, you cannot block with the bishop, you have to block with the rook, but now comes rook captures with check, and now queen captures. This is the point. Here, queen to b8, of course you don't want to do anything stupid, because if the queen is captured, then just pawn captures. There's, well, the problem of not being able to stop the pawn. So queen to b8, and now knight captures on b2, grabbing that knight here, bishop captures on b2, and now, let's say, b7. You have a protected passed pawn on b7, and, well, it's gonna be a problem for black. However, it queens on a dark square, black only won with the dark square bishop. The light square bishop will not be able to support the queening of the pawn, so it's very hard to say if white could actually play this out for a win. I don't think so, as black also has a passed pawn that's very strong, so it would be, I think it would be a draw. So that's what would happen here if knight to b2 was played. However, in the actual game, knight to c3 was played, and this is, well, only a little bit different, but it is different, because the game continues in the absolute same way. b6 attacking the rook and the queen here, rook to a1 with check, and now rook to d1 blocking. Now the problem is, of course, that the queen will be captured, because here we have knight captures on d1 with check, and now b captures on c7. So white is that little bit closer to this c8 check move, and this is a huge problem for black, because here knight captures on e3 check was played, and it seems to be deadly, but now bishop to d1. And here the problem with capturing with the rook, as it does deliver check, white just gives up the queen. White doesn't care, because white pawn is already on c7, and this is just completely winning for white. So what actually happened here was knight captures on c2. Black is now threatening checkmate. However, white queens with tempo. So c8 queen. We have bishop to f8 blocking, still mate being threatened, but queen to d8. Now the bishop is guarded, and there is no way for black to add more pressure. You can't go knight e3, you can't go below the board to attack the bishop, so nothing much for you to do. So here king to g7 was played, and now h4. It's still not still not absolutely straightforward, because it's a rapid game. You know, both players are very low on time. Anything could happen. If it was a classical game, of course, we would see resigns here, an instant resign from black. However, in a rapid game, you know, as long as you have a knight, you can still play. So knight to d4, and now knight to e3. Black goes knight to f5, offers a trade of knights, but now h5 by white. We have a trade here on e3, captures, and rook to a6. You cannot capture the bishop from here, but maybe you can play rook d6, attack the queen, and then pick up the bishop. So here, bishop back to b3, and now rook to d6. Attacking the queen, queen to g5, and now rook to d7. So black tries to keep everything intact. Maybe you can create some sort of a fortress here. White's pawns are all messed up. White has a light square bishop, so maybe you could set up some sort of a barrier here. But it's still a long way to go. Queen e5 check, king to g8, and now bishop to c4. Just a waiting move, waiting to see what black will do. Rook to d1 with check, king to f2, and now rook to c1. Attacks the bishop, and now queen f4. Just the defense against rook captures on c4. King to g7, and now g4. Just improving the position a little bit. Bishop to e7, and here queen to e5 with check. King to g8, and now queen to b8 with check. And here bishop to f8 is a must if black even wants to try and play this game out. However, king to g7 was played, and now, of course, it's all over. I'm sure you can see what happens even without pausing the video. The rook is on c1, and it's very, very simple. Queen to b2 check was played. This connects with the king and the rook, and of course it was in this position on move 47 that Awonder Liang resigned the game, and a wonderful victory for Jeffery Xiong in round 1 of the US Championship. So yeah, I think this was the nicest game played in the first day of the US Championship. So I do hope you guys enjoyed it. And yeah, that's the game. I really hope you enjoyed it because it was really crazy. I would like to thank David Kimura, Wallace Dunwoody, Oluwatoshin Sani, Kirby Wilson, and John Den for a contribution to my channel. Thank you a lot. I really appreciate it. As usual, you can check 2 of my previous videos here. Thank you for watching, and I will see you soon. Continuing the coverage of the US Championship, if a nice game such as this one arises, checking up on your wonderful suggestions and whatever else happens in the chess world. So thank you all. I will see you soon, and have an excellent rest of your day.